Good evening. Thank you guys for joining us. My name is Alex Dehgan. I'm going to be your Masters of Ceremonies this evening. It's really a pleasure to be here. I see a lot of really good friends in the audience. Earlier this year, I became a member of CRDF's Global Advisory Council, but I've been working with the organization for more than a decade. In fact, it started perhaps 10 years ago because of my good friend Andy Reynolds, who's in the audience with us. I asked him to be my date here tonight, but he turned me down. He was already coming. But Andy got me. I had just turned down a job at Yale and decided after 9/11 I wanted to serve as well, and took a AAAS fellowship. And 3 months into my fellowship, ended up in Saddam's palace. And I walked in and I was on the north wing, and they gave me this spectacular desk right by this giant plate glass window that overlooked downtown Baghdad. And I was like, wow, I lucked out. I've got this view that looks straight into the city. And then about 2 days later, when the first rocket just went screaming by that window, and I slowly looked around and looked at all the senior leadership, and they were really tucked behind pillars and far in the back. And as far away from that plate glass window, I knew that perhaps I had made a mistake. So thank you, Andy. But it was at that time that Ann Harrington, who's now Deputy Administrator for Defense Non-Proliferation for NNSA, and I worked together. We actually addressed the CRDF board and encouraged them to think about engagement in the Middle East and to do that pivot. As co-creator of something called the Iraq Virtual Science Library, we brought it to CRDF because we needed their help to be able to expand it. And one of the things I just did is we know the news from Iraq right now is exceptionally tough. But I wrote to the administrator of the IVSL 2 days ago, and I said, are you still being used? Do you still have journal access? Dude, the IVSL was to provide the equivalent of MIT's library to every university in Iraq, and it was successfully transitioned to the Iraqi government. And what was surprising and just great news to hear was the fact that it was still being used. It was still on, and one of the activities that CRDF and I took together was actually still being carried out despite the challenges that we see. CRDF has a unique, in many ways, unparalleled role to play in science diplomacy. It was born out of the end of the Cold War and non-proliferation efforts to encourage the redirection of former weapons scientists, to use science as a diplomatic tool in uniting the United States and the former Soviet Union. With the transformations in the Middle East, CRDF Global gained experience in helping build or restore new knowledge societies. Iraq, Russia, Ukraine, North Korea, and Iran right now are all in the news, and that news isn't always good. This makes the role that CRDF plays even more important, perhaps even more vital. It is when things are most difficult, when they are most unpopular, that courage and integrity matter the most, the ability to play that role of science diplomat. CRDF's mission can be to take on challenges found in places in the midst of change, which are filled with turmoil, which to help with the transformation of these places through harnessing the power of science as a diplomatic tool. Although science is not sufficient by itself to bring that change, it could change the reality of what is possible for entire societies. Even more powerfully, science can be a tool to unlock potential. In this way, CRDF is a translator among societies between disciplines. Although CRDF Global isn't a research institution, it can help make such institutions more relevant. Although CRDF is not a private corporation, it can help create new markets and new solvers and new opportunities. And although CRDF is not a government, it can create the framework on which relations between such governments can rest. I believe that if we have the technology to put my mother's Maytag washer machine on the surface of a comet that looks like a rubber ducky and is spinning in space at 40,000 miles an hour, we've got the ability to solve any of the world's problems through science. But the heart of it is people. The heart of it are actually the actual individuals that CRDF has brought together, that CRDF guesses. It is much easier to put that comet, that probe, actually chasing after 10 years after some comet than it is to actually get people to work together. But CRDF actually has ratcheted up that degree of difficulty and has been able to make it work. We are really excited about tonight's celebration. Not only will we be awarding 2 great honorees, but you will have a chance to learn more about CRDF Global by hearing from some of the scientists and the innovators that the organization has engaged around the world. After a brief intermission, you'll hear from Dr. Laith Abdul Rasul, a fellow in this year's CRDF Global Iraq Science Fellowship Program, and Josipa Maich, an entrepreneur involved with the organization's entrepreneurship and innovation programs. I am now pleased to introduce CRDF Global's President and CEO, Kathy Campbell.